Hello everyone, Keith here from the Solo Gamers Club, welcoming you back to my channel. Last week I shared an update announcing a significant milestone on the channel. Our channel has officially turned 4 years old this week. To celebrate, I'm diving into a special playthrough of War of the Ring, Alone in Middle-earth. This was the very first game that I featured on the channel way back when, and now we're revisiting it with a newly revised version of the Solo Rules 3.41. For this playthrough, I'll be including the Lords of Middle-earth and Warriors of Middle-earth expansions, along with the optional Council of Rivendell rules from the Lords of Middle-earth expansion. If you're unfamiliar with my previous playthroughs, the Alone in Middle-earth solitaire system lets the player take control of the Free Peoples, while the Shadow side is predominantly managed by the Shadowbot, aided by some dice rolls and tables. In earlier iterations of this solitaire system, I found the probabilities in the Shadow activation tables, especially for Sauron and Isengard, didn't feel quite right. In those earlier versions, Isengard was relegated to a probability on the military table. This time, I've placed Isengard directly into Sauron's gaze table, and I'm hoping that this tweak will give the faction more independence while still staying true to the narrative role. As depicted in the books and films, Saruman absolutely had his own agency, but was heavily influenced by Sauron through the Palantir of Orthanc. This adjustment is my attempt to balance those dynamics within the solitaire system that I've created. The real question becomes, how much agency should Isengard have? In the updated table, there is a 30% chance for Isengard to activate, while Sauron and his other forces hold a 40% probability. The remaining 30% is dedicated to Sauron's hunt for the ring. This playthrough will help me to determine if these percentages need further fine-tuning. I will be posting these updated files on the BGG site in the files section for War of the Ring. So, without further ado, let's journey back to the latter part of the Third Age of Middle-earth and explore War of the Ring, Alone in Middle-earth, together. Regarding the Council of Rivendell optional rules, I made some random rolls using some tables that I've created to help me determine the composition of the Fellowship. The results of those rolls indicate that Gandalf the Grey is going to be using his Keeper of Narya optional card. So we're going to replace the Grey Wanderer with the Keeper of Narya. He will be the guide of the Fellowship to start out with, and as a part of that he is going to gain the Narya die. So we'll add that to the dice pool for the Fellowship. Next, I've also determined that Meriadoc is going to be using his alternate form, and that's the Hobbit of the Shire. So we're going to remove Merry from the Fellowship, and he's going to begin the game in the Shire. So, while the rest of the Fellowship is going to begin in the Elven Fortress of Rivendell, we're going to begin with Meriadoc in the Shire. So, the game is now set. We've shuffled all of our card decks. We've got the starting models out on the map in their assigned spaces, and we're ready to go. I'm going to quickly go over the changes that I've made to the tables. And for the sake of new viewers that have not seen a playthrough using these solitaire rules, I'm going to walk you through the first turn, and I'll show you how that works. After that, we're going to just continue on with the playthrough, making the die rolls without further explanation. Now I'm going to bring those tables up on the screen, and I'll show you the things that have changed from the previous version. First attention would be drawn to Table B, and that's Sauron's gaze table. In the previous versions of this, we only had two results, military matters and the ring. Well now, as I've indicated before, we've directly included Isengard into that gaze roll. So I'm hoping that that is now going to give Saruman and Isengard the rightful amount of actions that they should be getting during a playthrough. Now we've also modified a few of these dice roll modifiers to account for some of the changes. Right now we basically have a 30% activation for Isengard, 40% for military matters, and 30% for the ring. So I'm going to have to decide if those probabilities need to be increased or decreased, specifically for Isengard. Right now it's at 30%. We could increase it to 35%, or we could decrease it to 25%, seeing how this playthrough goes. In accordance with Table B, we go to Table C, Military Table, and you can see on there that we have removed now Isengard as one of the possible selections for the focus location because it has its own activation built into the gaze table. So those are the primary changes for the system, and I'm hoping that this is going to finally solve my reservations regarding Isengard. That has always been kind of a sticking point for me in this system. It never seemed that I could get the percentages right to have Isengard operate properly. And I'm thinking that this might be the solution. So, as I've written on page 1 of the rule set, it says here, if the results are Isengard, we're going to take an action appropriate for Isengard with a focus on playing event cards related to Isengard. Isengard's primary focus is the destruction of Rohan and the possible capture of the ring, and its secondary focus is the capture of Rivendell, the Shire, and the Grey Havens. So that's pretty much Saruman's main focus in the game. And we're going to hopefully try, when he activates, we're going to attempt to fulfill those things in the game, and we'll see how that plays out during a playthrough. And as I said, for the sake of new viewers, I'm going to just quickly walk through the first turn using the tables that we used during the solitaire playthrough, and then after that we will just continue with the playthrough without further explanations. Now the beauty of this system is we will not be changing any of the rules as written. Everything in the game will be exactly as it is in the rules as written. We're just changing the procedures that we're going to use to control the shadow player. So we're going to begin with phase 1, and we're going to recover action dice and draw our event cards. At the start of the game, Free Peoples will begin with 4 action dice, while the shadow player will begin with 7. And now the Free Peoples will draw their event cards, one from each of the decks. All right, the Free Peoples player has drawn the cards There and Back Again, the Spirit of Mordor, and Wraiths of Fear. That is our faction card. Those cards will remain face up as we are the active player in the game. Now the shadow player will draw his cards, and we're going to keep those face down until there's a reason to turn them over and examine them. We want to keep as much suspense in the game as possible with this system, so we don't want to reveal more information than is required. Next up is the Fellowship phase. In this case, the Fellowship begins in the Elven Fortress of Rivendell. That's where they're going to start the game. And of course, we want to try to get them to the Crack of Doom, drop the ring in, and win the game. That is our primary mission. During this phase, we're able to change the guide of the Fellowship if we choose to, but we're going to leave it with Gandalf the Grey, and that's going to allow us to include the Nara die into our dice pool. If we were to have, say, Strider take over as the guide, we don't get to use that die, so we will include that into the Free People's dice pool. Next up is the Hunt allocation step, and that's where we're going to consult Table A, the hunt allocation table. This is going to tell us how many dice Shadow Player is going to place in the hunt box to start the game. We're going to make a d20 roll, and then we would add in any modifiers that apply. During the first turn, the only modifier that will apply is +1 to the die for the Fellowship being in Rivendell and the Fellowship progress marker less than 5. This rule is in place because basically of the choke point of Moria. After 5 movement points, in theory, the Fellowship could have exited past Moria, and then the urgency is not quite as great. So at the beginning of the game, we're going to try to utilize possibly that choke point in Moria. So we're going to make a d20 roll. We're going to add +1 to the result and consult Table A, and then we'll find out how many dice the Shadow Player is placing in the Hunt for the Ring box. Result is a 5 that's modified to a 6, and he's going to place 1 die in the box. So we'll place 1 die into the hunt box. Next up is phase 4, and that's our action roll. So each side is going to roll all of their action dice and preserve those for the next step in the game. So here is the Free People's action roll. Okay, those are the results. And, well, unfortunately, Gandalf's Narya ring ended up giving help to the enemy. We have an eye there, so that is going to be added to the hunt box. Okay, the other results are a Will of the West, a character die, and 2 event dice. So that's what they have for turn 1. Now the Shadow Player will make his roll. He has 6 dice. We've placed 1 in the hunt box during phase 3. All right, he has 1 additional eye will be added to the hunt box. So there's a total of 3 dice in there right now. His other results are a lot of army dice. He's got 4 of them, as a matter of fact, and 1 event die. So that is his starting dice for turn 1. So now we will begin phase 5, and that's our action resolution phase. These are the starting cards that we have available to us and our starting dice. Shadow Player has 5 dice, and we have 4. And incidentally, since Mary started outside the Fellowship, Shadow Player is entitled to 1 shadow token, and they have selected the diplomatic action token. If more than 1 companion would have started outside the Fellowship, they would have received both of the tokens. All right, we're going to begin the Fellowship's action resolution. And initial starting cards we have aren't too good. The There and Back Again card, we really don't want to separate anyone from the Fellowship as of yet. Spirit of Mordor we cannot use because we don't have any shadow armies with at least 2 different shadow nations included. The Wraiths of Fear card, we really can't use that at this point until the Dead Men of Dunharrow are activated as a faction. Now, 1 action we have is from Merry starting outside of the Fellowship. He has an ability called Messenger of Elrond. If Meriadoc is in a North city, you may use any action die to activate the North Nation and advance it 1 step on the political track. So that might be a good use of a couple of these event dice that we have, where we really don't want to play any of the event cards at this time. So I think we will keep that in the back of our mind, that could be a good use of those event dice. Now I'm more inclined to probably get the Fellowship moving. So I think we're going to use a character die, and we're going to do a Fellowship progress action. We still have our Will of the West. In case the Fellowship is found, we can use that to convert that into a character die, and we'd be able to hide the Fellowship. So I think that's a good play for us for first turn. So we're going to use that character die and we are going to declare Fellowship Progress action. It's going to advance us 1 point on the progress track. We're still currently hidden, but now Shadow Player gets to do his hunt for the ring. Alright, the Shadow Player has 3 eye dice into the hunt box, so that's going to entitle him to 3d6. There'll be no modifiers to this, but they're looking for 6s. If they can get a 6, that is a successful hunt. Here's the roll. And they've rolled a 5, a 4, and a 2. So they have no success. And we're going to place the character die that we used for the Fellowship Progress action, and we'll put that into the hunt box. That is going to modify future hunt rolls with a -1 modifier. And of course I meant to say a +1 modifier. Alright, that is the first action, and we're going to shift over now to the Shadow Player. These are the dice and tokens that the Shadow Player has available to him. What we're going to do now, we're going to consult Table B, that's Sauron's Gaze Table. We're going to roll a d20 and apply any modifiers that are listed. That will tell us what actions Sauron wants to take. Now, in this solo system, we're acting basically as Sauron's lieutenant. We're attempting to execute at least a part of whatever his command is. If it's Isengard, we're going to be activating Isengard to best effect. If it's military matters, we're going to be using the available dice we have and attempt to issue a military order using another table. That'd be Table C, and that will direct us where that military action is going to take place. Finally, if it is the ring, Sauron will be concentrating on his hunt for the ring, and he will either attempt to use cards to affect the Fellowship in some manner, or he will move forces to try to get hunt rerolls to the best of his ability. So that's what we've got. We're going to be rolling a d20 now, consulting Table B, and we will get a +1 modifier because of the fact that Fellowship is in Rivendell and the progress marker is less than 5. Here's the roll. The result is a 5. That is modified to a 6. That means Isengard is going to activate. So we have to activate at least 1 action in Isengard to fulfill Sauron's wishes. Now what we've got available to us is we have a shadow token, we've got 4 army dice, and 1 event die. Now what we want to do as the Shadow Player, we want to try to use event cards as much as possible. We don't want to get into a situation where we've got a full hand and the Shadow Player has to discard unplayed cards. So top priority is try to use cards. Now in this case, we have to try to use a card that is dealing something with Isengard to make that choice that Sauron has made valid. So we'll look through our cards here and see if there's any cards that we can use that would directly pertain to Isengard. Checking the event cards, none of them would apply directly to Isengard. We do have this Armed by Saruman faction card that would be able to be used, but the condition, prerequisite, is that we have to play it on the table if Isengard is at war. So we can't play any of those cards. So that limits what we're going to be able to do now. Our actions now would be to either use one of the 5 dice that we have that could pertain to Isengard, or possibly use that token that we got at the beginning of the game due to Meriadoc being outside the Fellowship, and I think that's what we're going to do. So we're going to use the Shadow Action token that we acquired, and we're going to use that to advance Isengard to the At War box. That would make the most sense in this situation, given the fact that our priority is Isengard. So we're going to move them to the At War box. That token is removed from the game. So now we're back to the Free Peoples. They have 3 action dice. Shadow Player has 5, so our options would be to use one of those 3 action dice or to pass. I think what I'm going to do is I'm going to play this event die, and we're going to use that to activate Merry's Messenger of Elrond ability. If Meriadoc is in a North city, you may use any action die to activate the North nation and advance it one step on the political track. Well, Merry is in the Shire, so that is in a North city, and we're going to use that event die then to activate the North and move them one slot down on the diplomatic or political track, I should say. So the North is now activated, and we're going to move that one slot down on the track. So they are 2 spaces away from the at war box, and that event die is placed in the discard. And we'll return now to the shadow player, and he'll make a roll on the gaze table, and we'll find out what his actions will be for this round. Here's the roll with a +1. Result is a 9. That is modified to a 10, and that is going to be military matters. So now we will consult table C, the military table, and find out where Sauron's focus is located. So now we're going to make a d20 roll consulting table C, and this will tell us the focus location for the military matters. It will also provide us with a primary objective and a secondary objective, depending upon the location. So here is the roll. Now this roll has no modifiers to it. Result is a 5, and that is Dal Guldur and Moria. And the primary objective for that force is going to be Lorien. Now, in case you want more structure into how the shadow player operates, I've also created an optional table D, and that's a military priority chart. I'll bring that up on the screen. That basically lists options with letters starting with A all the way down to I. And what you would do is you would begin with A and see if you can perform that action. If you can't, you'd go on to the next one on the slot and keep going down till you can fulfill that priority. I'm not going to use that during this playthrough, but I wanted to show the viewers that in case you're looking for more structure, we do have a military priority table, and I also have table E for ring priority. I'll bring that up right away so you can take a look at that as well. And we would use that if Sauron's gaze is in the hunt for the ring, and we would attempt to fulfill those priorities. It gives a little bit more structure to how the shadow player is operated, but I kind of like the sandbox method where we can pretty much use the gaze table to focus our attention into one area and perform the action that would make sense in that area. We always want to approach this as though we are playing the shadow player, even though it is being controlled by the dice rolls. So our focus is in Dal Guldur and Moria. So we have to determine a military action with the dice that we have that would fulfill that. And first thing that would come to mind would be to use an army die, which would allow us to activate 2 separate forces and move that on the map. And I think that's what we're going to do. First action will be we're going to activate the force in Dal Guldur, and we want to try to move that into a position that will get us into a position where we can strike at our primary objective, and that is Lorien. So I think what we'll do is I'm going to have the Nazgul and all of the forces, except for one garrison, move into North Anduin Vale. And that will get them closer to their objective. We'll leave one behind as a garrison. We don't want to give up freebies to the free peoples, so we always want to garrison any of those fortresses that we have. And I've selected North Anduin Vale. The reason being, it is the same distance from there to Lorien as it would be if we took South Anduin Vale. The advantage is North Anduin Vale places us closer to the woodland realm or dale if we choose to reorganize our strategy. Now this army die will also allow us to activate one other force. Now we have fulfilled Sauron's requirements of making a military move in the Dal Guldur and Moria region. So we could technically use that other army activation anywhere on the map. And I think the best thing we can do is probably to get the forces in Moria adjusted a little bit. And I think what we'll do is we're going to move one infantry from Moria into Dimril Dale. That'll help to reinforce that force that's coming from North Anduin Vale. And not to mention, if the Fellowship ends up taking the High Pass route, we'll have some forces here to get some positive dice roll modifiers, so that's a good thing. So that action die will be placed in the discard, and we'll move back to the Free Peoples. Well, we have 2 action die remaining, so our choices would be to use one of those 2, or to pass and let the Shadow player take another round. I think at this point we'll pass and we'll see what happens with the Shadow player. We can get more information after he takes another action, and then that would be, we'll have a better chance of deciding what to use those action dice for. So we'll pass. So, Shadow player is going to consult Sauron's gaze table. We'll make a roll, +1 modifier, and see what happens. They rolled a 17, and that's modified to an 18, and that's going to be the ring. So Sauron's focus is going to be on trying to recover his precious ring. And I think more than likely our best action would probably be to use an army die to get some forces in potential areas where we can get some rerolls in the future for hunt rolls. So I'm going to use an army die, and we're going to use that first activation to activate the forces in Moria, and we're going to move that orc army into Holland, and that would help to cover if the Free Peoples end up trying to take the Moria option. We'll be able to maybe get a dice reroll there. Now we have one more army activation that we can use, and technically we can apply that anywhere we want to on the map, because we fulfilled that first part of Sauron's gaze, which was his ring. And I think we'll take our second activation of an army, and we're going to use that to move these forces in Barad-dûr into the plains of Gorgoroth. We'll move all of those forces in here, creating a very large army that we can eventually have it move out into the plains of Ithien. So we'll place that action die into the discard, and we can return back now to the Free Peoples. Well, based upon what we know from the table situation, we have an army closing in on Lorien. So we might want to take some steps to try to deal with that. So we could play this Will of the West die as a muster die, and then do a diplomatic action on the elves. They're already active, and we could slide them down a little farther on the diplomatic track, and that would help us out in possibly bringing characters in during a future turn. Another option would be to use this event die and to use Meriadoc's Messenger of Elrond ability again, and we'd be able to move the Peoples of the North closer to the at-war box. That would definitely change things up. I think in this case, I'm going to use the Will of the West die as a muster die, and we're going to use that to execute a diplomatic action. So we're going to play this muster die as a diplomatic action, and we're going to move the elves down 1 slot, getting them closer to the at-war box. And then that die will be placed in the discard. So we'll return to the Shadow player, and we'll make his gaze roll, +1 to the roll. Result is a 20. Well, that's going to be the ring again. Well, considering the table situation, we've already kind of moved some forces that were available into likely spots where we can get hunt rerolls. So I think what we will do is we'll use the event die that we have, and we're going to use that to draw a character card. So we will draw a character card, and we're going to keep that hidden until such time as we need to reveal it. We don't want to give extra knowledge to ourselves that we don't need to have at this point. So we'll place that event die into the discarded dice's tray. And so now we return to the Free Peoples. We have one action die remaining. It's an event die. So we could either play that to draw a card, or we could use it to activate Meriadoc's special ability again. Those would really be the only options that we have available to us. We could use it to use the There and Back Again card. We could separate companions from the Fellowship if we chose to, but we really can't use that card to full effect until we could possibly get Gimli or Legolas into one of those locations. So I'll probably leave that for at this time. The other option is to pass and let the Shadow player take another round. I think we're just going to play our event die, and we're going to use that with Meriadoc's ability, Messenger of Elrond, and we're going to advance the north on the political track. So we will advance the north down on the political track, and they're one step away from the At War box, and they are active. So the Shadow player has 2 dice remaining. There are no dice left for the Free Peoples. So the Shadow player will be taking 2 actions in a row. Now what will happen is we're going to continue with the same procedure using the tables until we're down to only 1 action dice remaining. When that happens, we don't use the tables. When we're down to our last action die, we use that action die to best effect anywhere on the board. That was implemented to try to cover any possibilities that can't be accounted for in the tables, such as a Free People's attack into some of the more obscure areas of the board, like Angmar or Mount Gundabad, or possibly into Ruin. Somewhere in those areas that we couldn't necessarily cover, we would use this opportunity to be able to rectify those. Or if there was a Free People's army closing in on a fortress somewhere on the board, we'd be able to use this opportunity to put reinforcements in there. So that's kind of how this is going to work. So we'll make our roll on the gaze table. The +1 modifier is still active. We rolled a 19, and that is modified to a 20. So we're back with the ring, the search for the ring. Now there may be times where you have certain action dice that don't necessarily help trying to fulfill Sauron's gaze. In this case, we've got 2 army dice. We've already made movements on the map to try to get as many reroll potentialities for search rolls as possible. So there will be times where you won't have the ability to fulfill Sauron's wishes, and then you just try to use that in the best way possible. So in this case, I think what I'm going to do is I'm going to use the army die to activate armies for movement. We're going to make 1 movement using that force in Holland. We'll move that into the Fords of Brunnen. And then we'll take one of these Saruman armies and move that into Holland. That would potentially get us some rerolls there if the Fellowship ends up moving through there. So we'll place that die into the discard. And now we're down to the last action die for the Shadow player, and we can use that anywhere on the map. There'll be no rolls made on Sauron's gaze table. So, examining the map, we have an army die available. We can't make any attacks because Sauron is not in the At War box yet. So I think the best thing we can do is probably just try to get our armies into good position. I think we'll use that army die to activate 2 separate armies. We'll take the force in Minas Morgul, and we'll move that into North Ithilien. And then we'll take this entire large force on the plains of Gorgoroth, and we'll move them into Minas Morgul. And I think what I'll do is I'm going to use an army marker. We'll place that into Minas Morgul, and then all of these forces are going to move and form the first army. So we'll place that army die into our tray. And that completes Phase 5, our action resolutions. Okay, so now we will commence our next turn. So we'll start with recovering all of our action dice. Free Peoples will be able to retain the Narya die because Gandalf is the guide. Shadow player will get all of his dice back, and since the Shadow player or the Free People's player made a move on Fellowship Progress, they'll have to retain at least one die though in the hunt box for next turn. Our event card draws reveal Sauron is a neighbor, Elven Rope, and the Last Battle. We'll add those cards to our totals. Right now we have a total of 4 standard cards and 2 faction cards. Hand limits are 6 on the standard cards and 4 on the faction cards. Shadow player has drawn his cards. Right now he has a total of 5 standard cards and 2 faction cards. Next up is the Fellowship phase. Last known position of the Fellowship is in Rivendell. We know they've moved 1 space. So that is as much as we know. We're going to retain Gandalf the Grey, Keeper of Narya, as our guide. So we're going to gain that Narya die for the turn. Now it's our hunt allocation step, and we'll make the roll. +1 modifier is active. It's a 12 modified to a 13, and that's going to be 2 dice. So the Shadow player is going to place 2 dice into the hunt box. Next step is the action roll, and we'll roll all of our dice for the Free Peoples. Okay, this time we've got a muster, character, Will of the West, faction, card play, and combination muster and army die. So that's what we've got for the Free Peoples. Now it's the Shadow player's roll. He only has 5 dice left to have been placed in the hunt box. And this time he's got another eye. So we'll add a 3rd eye to the hunt box. There's a muster, muster army, another army, and another muster die. That's what the Shadow player will have available for his turn. So we'll move on to action resolution, starting with the Free Peoples. We have 5 dice. The Shadow player has 4, so we won't be able to pass. We're going to have to play an action die. So these are the event cards and action dice that we have available to us. And I think at this point I'm going to use the character action die that we've got, and we're going to get some Fellowship progress moving. There's 3 eyes in the hunt box, but I think we need to keep them moving. We do have the Will of the West die available in the event that we have to hide the Fellowship, so I think we'll do that. So we'll play the character action die, and we're going to advance the Fellowship another point on the Fellowship track. So we're at 2. And now Shadow player will conduct his hunt. His hunt roll is going to be of 3 dice, and he's looking for 6s. And he has 1 success. He does have a success. The other 2 were 3s. So that is going to entitle the Shadow player to a drawing of a hunt tile, and let's take care of that right now. We'll reach into our bag and select a hunt tile. And we've got a 3. All right, so I've got to account for 3 points of damage on the Fellowship. So we've got several choices here. First choice would be to take the guide as a casualty. Gandalf the Grey has a leadership value of 3, so he'd be able to absorb all of that damage if we chose to do that. Another option is to draw a tile, and we would take a random casualty. And the other option would be to use the ring and take the corruption. I think at this point I'm more inclined to take Gandalf as the casualty. So we're going to remove him from the board. He's going to use up all 3 of that hunt damage. We'll remove that tile from the map. And Gandalf the Grey is no more. So that means Strider is going to take over as the guide. He is the next highest leadership value. So Strider will take over. His new ability as guide is you may use any of your action die results to hide a revealed fellowship. All right, so we will put Strider at the front of the column. And then we have to remove Gandalf's token from the fellowship. So we've removed his token and we've randomized fellowship tokens. So that was unfortunate. We ended up losing Gandalf, but we do have 2 on the fellowship progress track, and we're still not revealed yet, so that is great. All right, that character die is going to be moved into the hunt box for future rolls, and we will continue on. All right, the shadow player is up next, and we'll consult Sauron's gaze table. Result is an 18 that's modified to a 19 with the dice roll modifiers, and that is the hunt for the ring. All right. Well, I think the first thing we're going to do is examine our character cards and see if there is any card that we can play with the dice we have that could target the fellowship. And there are no event cards that would apply towards the hunt for the ring. Well, given the limitations with the lack of cards and the dice that we have available to us, I think the best thing we can do is probably use a muster die, and we'll move Sauron to the at war box. That would help to free him up for more actions, and I think that would make sense at this point. Doesn't exactly fulfill the chart, but again, there are some times when you just can't do that, and you take the best available choice. Okay, we'll shift back to Free People's Player. These are the dice that we have and these cards. I would like to bring a faction into play, but we don't meet any of the criteria as of yet, so we can't do that. And then I guess we'll take our next best action we have available. Well, it might be time to maybe split some members of the fellowship off. We could use this There and Back Again card. And since Gandalf is now gone the way of the dodo, we could maybe try to get some forces into Fangorn and get him back as Gandalf the White and gain an extra action die. This one says separate from the fellowship one companion or group of companions. You may move them 1 extra space. Then, if Gimli or Legolas are in Dale, Erebor, or the Woodland Realm, activate the Dwarven and North nations and advance the Dwarven and Elven and the North nations 1 step on the political track. Well, I don't think we're going to be able to get them into those positions, unfortunately. Well, our current fellowship progress is at 2. We would gain an extra movement point from the There and Back Again card. That would be 3. And then it would be the speed of the best speed of the characters that we separate out. So if we chose Strider, he has a leadership value of 3. That would give us a total of 6 movement points. So 6 movement points would be, say, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. They'd be short of Lorien. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, we'd be short of Dale or the Woodland Realm. So that won't help us too much. Well, I could risk another fellowship progress. This would be with a +1 modifier with 3 dice. That doesn't sound like it'd be too good of a chance of success. We'd have to use our Will of the West die and convert that to a character die. We would not have any ability to... Well, we could hide the fellowship using Strider's ability. He can use any action die to hide the fellowship. So that would be an option. Another option would be to use any action die and use Meriadoc's Messenger of Elrond ability. We'd be able to get the North to the at war box. They'd be able to start drawing reinforcements. It's another option. Yeah, I think that's what we're going to do. We're going to use the muster die that we've got, and we'll use Meriadoc's Messenger of Elrond ability, and we're going to move the north to the At War box. So the muster die is played, and we advance the north to At War. All right, so we can start drawing reinforcements now with that faction. Shadow player is up next. We'll make a roll on the gaze table, +1. Rolls of 4, that's modified to a 5. And that's going to be Isengard. All right. I think the best thing we can do with Isengard is to play a muster die, and then we are going to bring in a minion. And in this case, it's going to be Sauron, Corrupted Wizard. So we're going to place his model at Orthanc. And that's going to give Isengard a lot more options now. He has the voice of Saruman. As long as Orthanc is under your control and not under siege, you can use a muster die to recruit 1 regular Isengard unit in every Isengard settlement, or replace 2 regulars into elites. He also has Servants of the White Hand. Each Isengard elite is now considered a leader, as well as an army unit for all movement and combat purposes. So that's a good activation for us. So Saruman has entered the fold. And Saruman's entrance will give the shadow player an extra action die in the next turn. So we'll place both of these dice into the discard cup. All right. And the Free Peoples are up once again. Now the north is activated, and that could give us some opportunities, especially in the Angmar and Mount Gundabad region. We have some forces here in the northern part of the Shire, and we could activate that elite unit, move it into Arnor, and put some pressure on Angmar, and force the shadow player to respond to that more than likely. I think we'll do that. I'm going to play a muster army die that will allow us to activate 2 different regions for movement. And we're going to move that elite northern unit, I think, into, well, it's either Arnor or Enton Moors. I'm not sure which would be a better, probably Enton Moors, I guess. We'll move him there. Now we have 1 army activation remaining. And I think we'll use that to activate the elves in the Grey Havens. And we're going to move them into the Tower Hills. Okay, so that die is going to be placed into the discard, and we'll return to the shadow player. Okay, shadow player will make his gaze roll. Result is an 11, modified by 1 to a 12, and that's going to be military matters. All right. We'll make a second roll now and find out where Sauron's gaze is focused. Rolls a 15, and that's going to be in Mordor. So Mordor is his main focus. Now, considering that his focus is in Mordor, we do have a direct threat, though, on Angmar. If that elite northern unit in Eton Moors was to activate, they could take over Angmar with no fight. So I think we're going to have to use a muster army die there as an emergency move, and we're going to have to recruit in Angmar. And I think they're going to recruit an elite unit there. There's not much choice in the matter. All right, so that muster army die is placed in the discard. We'll move back to the Free Peoples. Well, we have 2 action dice remaining, a Will of the West and a Draw Faction Event. I think we'll use the Draw Faction Event. We'll use that and draw Faction card. That faction card is revealed to be by chance or by foresight. Draw 3 cards from the faction event deck, add 1 card to your hand, and then place both of the other 2 cards on either the top or bottom of the deck in the order you prefer. Okay, so that is our action. Shadow player is down to his last die, and that is an army die. So we're going to find some space on the board to put that to best effect. And I think we're going to use that army die to activate a force for movement. And we're going to activate the first army. And the entire first army is going to move into South Ithilien. That'll put them into a combat position against Osgiliath. And I think our second activation of an army is going to be that force we've got in North Anduin Vale. And we're going to move that force into Dimril Dale. And that'll put us into a combat position with the elves in Lorien. Now we have to decide if we want to leave a line of communications back to Dal Guldur or take the entire force with us. The advantage of leaving that there is if the Fellowship ends up moving through this area, that would guarantee us more than likely a hunt reroll. But I think those forces are going to be needed for the attack, so we're going to include that into the attack force. And that's going to finish the activations for the Shadow player. We have one die left for the Free Peoples, and that's a Will of the West. And I think what we're going to do is we're going to use this Will of the West die, and we'll play that as a character die, and we're going to play this Elven Rope card. And that says, the Elven Rope special hunt tile is now in play. Add the tile to the hunt pool when the Fellowship is on the Mordor track, and we'll be able to add that blue 0 tile to the draw bag when the time comes. So we'll place the Elven Rope tile near the Crack of Doom area, and then we will add that to the draw bag once the Fellowship reaches the steps of Mount Doom. And so that's going to complete our second turn. So far I'm pretty happy with how the tables are operating. I'm leaning to actually making an adjustment though regarding the probabilities on the Hunt for the Ring. I think that might need to be lowered by 1 slot down to 25%, and then we would add an additional 5% to military matters. I think that might be in order from what I'm seeing so far, but we'll continue playing and see how that's working out. Okay, beginning our next turn, the Free Peoples now have lost that Narya dice, so they're down to their regular 4 faction dice. With the appearance of Saruman, Shadow player now has 8 dice. Free Peoples player draws their event cards. They have Through a Day and a Night, Bilbo's Song, and In Long Swift Lines. That'll put us to a total of 5 standard cards and 4 faction cards. So we're still within the hand limits. All right, the Shadow player is going to draw his cards, but he's going to be over his standard card hand limit. He has 7 cards. So what we're going to do is we're going to place all the cards together, the standard cards. We'll shuffle those upside down, and we're going to randomly discard one of them, so we won't know which one is lost. And that one ended up to be a character card. So the character card, whatever it was, is discarded. So right now we've got a hand of 6 standard cards and 3 faction cards for the Shadow player. In the Fellowship phase, our last known position is Rivendell. We've made 2 movements on the Fellowship track, and Strider is our guide. So we'll leave all that as it is. Now Sauron's going to make his hunt allocation roll, and we will be getting a +1 die roll. Result is a 10, that's modified to an 11, and he'll be placing 2 dice into the hunt box. Incidentally, if a hunt allocation roll would ever violate the rules, meaning that say we rolled up no dice in the hunt box and the Free Peoples had made a movement in the previous turn that mandates that 1 eye be placed in the box, the rules will override the roll. So in that case, we would place 1 hunt die in the hunt box. But in this case, 2 eyes are placed in the hunt box. That means that the Shadow player will have a total of 6 dice to roll during the next phase. And we'll move on to our action roll for the Free Peoples. And they have rolled 2 muster, a muster army, and an event die. That's what they've got. Here's the Shadow player's roll. And he has rolled 2 extra eyes. So there are 4 eyes in the hunt box. Wow. And he also has 2 events and 2 character dice. Okay, so that's what he's going to have available for himself in the coming turn. We'll move on to the action resolution, beginning with the Free Peoples. Each side has 4 dice, so they won't be able to pass. We've got 2 muster, an event, and a muster army. And then these event cards. And we might have an opportunity here. I think what we're going to do is we're going to play a muster army die. And we're going to activate this through a day and a night. Play on a Free People's army containing a companion. Move the army containing the companion up to 2 regions. The regions must be free for the purposes of army movement, and no Free People's units may be picked up or dropped off along the way, other than possibly splitting the army initially. And I think we're going to use that with Mary. So Mary is going to play that card, and using that muster army die, we can move that force then from the Shire 2 spaces. And let's see if maybe we can put some pressure on the Dunlendings. And I think we will move them into the Old Forest area and into Cardolan. We've got North Dunland is open, so that could be a problem for the Shadow player. So we'll put that die into the discard, and the card is also removed from play. And we'll make a roll on the gaze table. +1. Result is an 18. That's modified to a 19, and that is the ring. So the first thing I'm going to do is take a look at our character cards and see if there's anything that we could use that will help us in hunting the ring. And there is an event that we can play, and we're going to play the card, Give It To Us. Okay, well, that'll cost us a character action token that says, the Give It To Us special hunt tile is now in play. Add the tile to the hunt pool when the Fellowship is on the Mordor track. All right. So we're going to place that tile into our collection of tiles that we've got here that will be added in once they reach the Mordor track. So we'll flip that upside down. The die is consumed, and so is the card. Next up is the Free Peoples. We have 2 muster die and an event die. And I think we're going to use a muster die to play this faction card. Sauron is a neighbor. Play on the table if Sauron is in play. Place 3 Ent figures on this card. When the Shadow player uses Saruman's Voice of Saruman's ability, recruit one of these figures in Fanghorn, or add it to the starting setup. You may use any faction die result to recruit one of these figures normally. You must immediately discard the card from the table as soon as there are no more figures on it. So let's do that. So we'll play that card and action figure, and then we're going to place 3 Ents on the card. And that is going to be played on the table. So we'll place that card in that C area, and that will remain on the table unless there are no more of those Ents left on the card. All right, we'll make a roll on the gaze table for Sauron's activation. Result is an 8. That's modified to a 9, and that is going to be military matters. We'll make another roll and consult table C and see where his focus is centered. Rolls a 3, and that is Angmar or Ruin. Okay. And I think the Shadow player is going to use a muster die, in this case an event die. An event die to play the muster card Pits of Mordor. Play if Sauron is at war. Recruit 2 Sauron regular units in each of 3 different Sauron's strongholds, and that's what he's going to do. We're going to place 2 of them up in Angmar to help defend that. We'll place an additional 2 in Moria. And I think the last 2 we are going to place in Dal Guldur. That was a good card for the Shadow player. Okay, that card is discarded, and the dice will go into the discard. We always want to try to prioritize the play of event cards, especially for the Shadow player, because otherwise he has to discard those cards, like what happened in the previous event card draw phase. We were over our hand limit. So we want to try to avoid that if possible. Okay, we're back at the Free Peoples. They have 2 dice left, an event and a muster die. I think we're going to use that muster die as a diplomatic action, and we're going to move the elves closer to at war. So the muster die is played, and the elves move to within 1 of the at war box. Shadow player has 2 dice left, a character and an event die, and we'll see what they're going to do for Sauron's gaze. +1. Result is a 4 that's modified to a 5, and that's going to be Isengard. So we have to determine an action for Isengard. None of the event cards could be applied at this point effectively. So we have either we can draw a character or army card, or we could use that character die, seeing as we have an elite unit here. And we could use that to activate the force, or we could use Saruman himself. He's there. We could do that and launch an attack on the Fords of Isen against Rohan. And I think that is what we're going to do. So we're going to use that character die, and we're going to initiate an attack on an adjacent force using a leader. And Saruman or his elite unit is present in Orthanc. So let's set that up on the battle board. All right, we've set the forces up on the battle board. We've got 2 Rohan standard units and a leader. They are in a fortification because of the Fords of Isen. Attacking is Saruman, 4 regulars, and an elite. First thing we have to do is decide if we're going to be playing a combat card. Now, the decision to play combat cards for the Shadow player is handled very simply. What's going to happen is we're going to count up all of the possible cards that Sauron could use as a combat card, and that would include as well any of the faction cards that could be included. We're going to roll a d6, and then if the result is less than the number of combat cards in his hand, he's going to play a card. A roll of 1 will always result in an attempt to play a combat card, while a result of 6 will always not play a combat card. So the Free Peoples have to select their card first. And I think the Free Peoples are going to use the combat card Daylight. The Shadow player rolls a maximum of 3 dice during his combat roll. All right, so that one is active. Shadow player has a total of 4 cards that could be played as a combat card. So we're going to roll a d6, and if we can roll less than a 4, they are going to play the card. And we'll make the roll. Result is a 3, so they will be playing a combat card. What we're going to do now is we're going to shuffle all of the cards that they have, and we're going to randomly draw one, and we will keep drawing until a combat card is able to be played, one that would qualify for this. First one would be Relentless Assault. Before the combat roll, you may inflict and apply up to 2 hits against your units. Add 1 to all dice on your combat rolls for each hit that you inflicted. Well, that would be a playable card, and they are going to use that Relentless Assault. Next step is we're going to determine our leader rerolls. And we've got Free Peoples have 1 leader there, so they're going to get 1 reroll. We have 1 leader because Sauron now, with his abilities, allows elite units to act as leaders. So they're going to get 1 for that. And Sauron himself is commanding. And he has a leadership value or a combat value of 1. Yes, that's known as a leadership value. So he's going to gain 1 for that. So they have 2 rerolls. All right. And now we're going to roll our combat dice. Now the free peoples are going to be entitled to 2 dice. They've got 2 combat units. Shadow player is going to use that relentless assault, so he's going to eliminate 1 of his forces, and that's going to give him a +1 to the die roll. That will help to defeat these fortifications that the free peoples are in. Now the problem is with that card that was played, the last battle, they're limited to only 3 dice, even though they would be entitled to a total of 4. So the shadow player will be rolling 3 dice. They're going to be gaining a +1 for their relentless assault, and they need 6s during the first round. So here is the first round of combat. All right, well, each side is going to be getting a hit on the other. 5 is turned into a 6. That'll be a hit for the shadow player, and a 6 is rolled for free people. So each side is going to have to take a casualty, but we do have rerolls available. Shadow player is going to gain 2 rerolls, and the free peoples will gain 1. So let's re-roll those dice and find out what's happening. All right, nobody got any hits there. So those are the final battle results. Each side is going to have to take a casualty. So we'll take 1 of each regulars from both sides. Now the Isengard forces will go back to the force pool, but the Rohan forces are permanently eliminated. And now if a second round is to happen, they lose their fortification bonus, because that's only during the first round, and they're fairly outnumbered. I'm not sure what we should do here. I think the Rohan forces are going to withdraw. So the Rohan forces, I think, will withdraw into Helm's Deep, and Saruman can advance after combat, and he's going to, I think, advance everything. He'll put in the elite and the 2 regulars. Saruman cannot move. He's locked into Orthanc, and that will bring the battle to a close. And we'll return now to the Free Peoples player. All we have is an event die. And I think we're going to draw an event card with that. And we'll draw an army card, strategy card. And we've drawn the card, Wisdom of Elrond. Activate 1 Free Peoples nation of your choice and advance that nation 1 step on the political track. All right. Shadow player is down to their last die, and that is an event die. So we'll see if we can play any of these event cards that they have. And they're going to use that event card to play a faction card, and that is Armed by Saruman. That says play on the table if Isengard is at war. When this card is in play, Dunlending figures in regions with the Fellowship are considered Shadow Army units for the purpose of the hunt. Dunlending figures in the same region with the Shadow Army add their combat strength when one of their call to battle effects is used and can be taken as casualties against Ent attacks. The Free Peoples player can force Armed by Saruman to be discarded by using a Will of the West action die. Okay, so that card is active. That'll be placed on the board. And so that's going to bring the round to a close, and I think we're going to end the video here. We'll regroup for another episode of War of the Ring. This is Keith from the Solo Gamers Club, thanking everyone for tuning in and wishing everyone a pleasant evening. Good night.